Hello guys, and welcome to another episode where we make a game using Unity. We're making currently a 2D game. We have been doing this for the past couple of weeks, so if you are new to the series, go back and watch these other episodes. I will add those to the link in the description down below. Okay, so let's get started. Open up Unity and our project. All right, we have our project open. And let's open up the C# script. I will have to fix this at some point. Okay, so we currently have this goal thing, right? And this is where if we're player one, we say that player two scored. So in here, we are going to need to so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be making a system where it holds information about each player, maybe the score, wins, losses, and maybe that stuff. So let's do that first. So we're going to create a new C# script. Now, what should we call it? Let's call it Match Manager, since all of the match stuff is going to go there. Let's open it up and let's write something. So, the match manager is going to be this superclass where it's going to be in charge of what the rules are for gameplay for this game. It's going to be keeping track of the players, and right now we have an issue if we actually go back here. And last time we changed the player 2, we added a player 2 and we changed the player paddle script to whenever we have the second player here, we change the arrows, the keys to be arrow up and down arrow to actually move it. And if we play it, you can see when I do WS, it's moving the player on the right side, and when I'm moving the up and down keys, it's moving the player on the left side. So we need an actual way of telling the game where we want to position these. Ideally, the WASD sting is a player with those keys, or WS, we don't have A and D. That one ideally wants to be on the left side because I'm controlling it with my left hand. And it's kind of weird right now if you play it and you see that the right one is moving, you'd be expecting to see the left one moving. So we have to fix that at some point. We may try to fix it today, but we may not get to it. For now, we are going to just deal with the score and the UI. So let's get started. Do we have any notion of what a player is? No, we don't. Okay, we don't really need that at this point. So we're gonna have a list, and this list is going to have a player ID, and it's gonna be pretty much the scores, score list, let's call it, and we can access this through the ID for that player. So ID 0 is going to be player 1, ID 2 or 1 is going to be player 2. Um, okay, so in start, we're going to make sure that we have that there. So these, we're going to say for int player ID is 0, player ID is less than player ID dot size. So the reason why I created this, if we go back into the player input, I believe it is, we have size here. So size is going to tell us how many players we have. So if we ever wanted to add more players for some reason to this game, we could do this, and this size would automatically scale to fit these people here. Right now we don't need to, so here we can say note, add any new player slots or IDs above this line so that it doesn't mess it up. So if you see, this one is obviously 0 when this gets created, and this is 1, so this is 2. The size is actually 2. We don't have to explicitly tell it, but we can tell it that we could specify where we want to start, but we want to start at 0 so that we can actually look into lists in the correct way. Otherwise, we would have to do some arithmetic to actually do that. And this, because it is an enum, it has to be casted to an integer. Not that, integer. And then we just do player ID, we add that. So here we're gonna say we're gonna add, and we just add a 0 for now because it's the start of the game. So that's pretty much it. Now we want a public void. We'll say add score, and we're not passing the player ID. Whoever scored, right? Player ID, not DI, ID. And we're going to pass in the value. So what we're making here is we're making kind of like a system where we want to be like, okay, somebody scored. How do we know who scored? We pass in the ID and we pass in the value. We could make it so that we don't have to pass a value, and it'll just be like, okay, for the score where the player ID exists, we'll just add 1 to it. And then we have to cast this into an integer. And we could do that, or we could do maybe like plus equals some value if we want to increment by more than just 1. Okay, so we're gonna leave it by 1 for now. And we also, let's do maybe like a reset thing. So let's see, reset scores, and we would just have to do that here instead of adding anything. We'll just pass in the player ID, and that's it. Okay, so usually for managers there should only be one system that does this. Right now we can actually have multiple ones. So we want to make this into a singleton, okay? So what is a singleton? A singleton is pretty much a I forget what the term is. But it allows you to create and make sure that there is only one object ever in existence in your system or code or game or whatever that does what it does. So right now we can actually have multiple instances of Match Manager, but we don't need it. We don't need more than one. We only need one, and to make sure that we only have one, a singleton can help with that. Okay, so let's create a singleton. So it's going to be a static. It's going to be a type of Match Manager, and it's going to be public as well because we want to access it. Actually, this one is going to be private. So make sure that nobody can ever mess with the instance of your singleton, because if somebody can, they can mess it up. They can tell this instance that it's no longer active when you need it, and then if you access it and you don't have it, you're gonna crash. Okay, so only itself can actually make itself. Okay, nobody else. Nobody else can touch it. Um, so in okay, so we have that. That's our instance, and then we're gonna have a public, pretty much the same thing. Now, the reason why I'm gonna be using a property here for getting this instance is because properties let you decide who gets to control its access. So we're only going to have a getter, right? And we're going to return at some point this lowercase instance. But we don't have any setters. There's no way of actually changing this data. There's only a way of getting the data. And the only one who can access this and change this data is this object itself, right? So how do we make this? So we first have to say if the instance is null, that means that we don't have anything, right? So we want to find it. Find it in the game to see if it exists. Okay, so how do we find something? So the way we find something is we just have to say find object of type, and we pass in the type. The type is Match Manager, right? And if this instance is still not there, if it's still null, then we want to create it, right? That means that it's not existent yet. We don't have it in the systems. We need to create it. So how do we create it? It's pretty simple. First, we need a game object, right? We need to create a new game object, and we want to name it. We actually want to name it type of, I think, .name, right? And the type of is going to be the Match Manager. And we can actually do this system type this, I believe, and then pass in the Match Manager. Is that how it works? New. Type of. There we go. All right, so that line of code, it's gonna add Match Manager, if we actually see this, we can actually open a new window here, bring it over here, and go to Unity. If I can spell it right, not asset store, but game object. The API, we need the API, and we want to look at the constructor. Are we in it? Yes. So we want to find the constructor. So this is the constructor. And here, if you ever don't know how to do something, or if you don't remember how to do something, always look at the documentation. It's going to help you. So here we can see that GameObject has three constructors. This is how we create an object, right? The constructor is called whenever you create an instance of an object. So the first one is you can just create it with no name, right? The second one is with a name, and the third one is with a name and this parameter, which is an array of components of type, right? So what we just did is we told this game object that we wanted to make sure that it contained on creation the object type of match manager. Now what this is going to do, this is pretty much the same thing as saying go.addComponent match manager afterwards. Pretty much the same thing, but it does it in one go. So now what we have to do is we're going to say get component now match manager, and that's it. Before we can actually do that, it's always a good idea to check and make sure that the game, that the object that we wanted to create, it's not empty, that the creation didn't fail, because it is possible. So we make sure that we do have the game object created, and we get this, and that's it. Okay, so once this all runs, then we'll have that instance, and every time we only create it once, because the next time we call this instance, then it's going to see this and it's going to be like, okay, this is false because it's not null anymore, so we're just going to return it. Okay, now we can also do something else. We can have maybe a private void initialize, right? We have maybe like this function, and we have this private or public boolean that is initialized. We'll set it to false, and then this one can say is initialized is true, and then whenever we create it, and if the instance is not initialized, so if it is false, then we can call instance dot initialize to maybe initialize anything that we need to initialize in here. So we can actually put, instead of start, we can actually put that in here to initialize it, and we can get rid of that. This is going to be private, and we can actually just say that it's serialized so that we can see it. Yeah, we can leave it there. And another thing that we can also do is we can have a property here saying public static bool exists or something like that, and then get return. So we'll pretty much return, we'll return true or false based on the instance of this thing, and we want to call the capital one, because we want to call this one since it does all this, and it's not null, right? So if it's not null, then exists is going to be equal to true. And that is it for that. Okay, cool. So now, because we have this an instance and it is a static instance, that means that we do not need an instance of this object to access this instance. So we could just say in here match manager instance dot add score, and we can pass in the player ID. Now, where do we have player ID? So if we are player ID, okay, so we'll say player ID 2, and we'll pass, well, actually, it just takes that, right? And we'll delete that, and we'll pass in this, and say 1. All right. And that should add the score. Cool. So now what we need to do is to display it. So let's do this. Whenever we do this, debug log error format, we're just going to do a debug log for now because we don't have a UI. We're going to say that we're just going to say who scored or whatever when those get called, right? So player, and then we'll pass in the, it's 0, scored, and we'll pass in score, I guess, I don't know. And here's going to be the player ID that we're passing in, and here will be the let's do int score equals, and instead of that we'll do that. What happened? Cannot implicitly convert to player ID. Duh. Okay. So, yeah, it's not player ID. It is int, because we are storing integers or score. Okay. So yeah, that's good now. Can't believe I did not see that earlier. Okay. So why am I putting plus plus on this side? So if you put it on this side, it tells the compiler that before you assign it into this variable, you want to increase it in here. So this is the same as saying +1, right? But if the plus pluses were on this side, then you would get whatever current score you have here into here, and then it would add it afterwards. And that's not what we want. We want the updated version of this. Okay? So that's how that works. And that is pretty much it. Now let's go back to goal, because before we actually call instance, We want to do that check, right? Match manager exists. So if it exists, we'll call that. And we'll do the same thing here. And we'll just change 2 to 1 again. And that's it. So we're first calling exists. Exists is going to call this instance, which in turn it's going to check all of this, initialize the instance like that, and then return it. Well, it's not going to return it, but it'll hold it, so that when we actually call this, we actually get something back, right? Now we don't really need to call it, because once we call this, it should do all this and return the correct instance, but we just want to be safe and careful and make sure that it works. All right, so if we go back here and let it compile, we don't need to add this guy into the scene. It's gonna be added by itself, right? So if we just play it, and once it goes past that, you'll see that it created the match manager, and we can actually see the scores. So this one, player 1, scored just now, and we have 1, right? So if we score again, let's try to score for the other team now. So slow. There we go. Now player 2 scored, and we see here that that is true. Cool. All right. So let's work now on the user interface, right? So we are going to create a panel just so that we can have this. We're going to call this in-game UI or something. In-game UI canvas. And before we get started, we want to go into the scalar canvas, and we're going to say scale with screen size. We're going to set the resolution to be 1920 by 1080, and we're going to match the width of the height, and we're going to set it to be 0.5. What this does is it allows us to properly scale our UI based on the resolution that we have, right? So if we didn't have that, I think if it was just a constant pixel size like we have it there, well, you could see it scaling there, but it would actually not scale properly. Okay, so we're gonna set it like that. Now let's see what do we want. So I guess that could be there, and then let's say that we wanted. Let's say that we want here a vertical layout, and we want it to start at the upper center of the screen, and we want another panel here. This panel is going to occupy this whole space, so we want this to be, actually, I guess we don't. I think this was 1920 is the width. And the height is going to be, let's say, just 200 or something. And I guess this is pretty big. We're just gonna make sure it fits that. Child, let's say child controls the width of this so that it's always expanded all the way, just for these. And we'll control the height, and we'll say that that's fine. And we're saying that this is the top panel, whatever that might mean. And for now, we'll just have, okay, we'll have the score on either side, right? So what we need to do here is we need a horizontal layout. We want to start it at the middle center. And we want to control the height here. So that we have two things in there, right? We're gonna two panels. So this is gonna be player 1 panel, player 1 panel, or something like that. And this one's gonna be player 2 panel. The width is gonna be 1920 times half of that. And same thing here, 1920 times half of that. Actually, probably not. Seems like it's not. So I guess we just have to play with it. Erg. So if we just had this guy, it would be 1543 it looks like. So we want that and just times it by half. And we'll just copy, oh damn it, we'll just copy this panel. And there we go, that's half and half. Okay, so once we have that, each one of these is going to have a vertical layout group. They're going to be all middle, and they're just going to do the width, match the width, and actually we can just delete this again and duplicate it so we don't have to keep duplicating what we're doing. We just copy it and change the name and yeah, whatever. So then we gotta add, I usually use Text Mesh Pro, import essentials, because it's way better than the original system that they had. I don't think I need that extra stuff. I like it much better. So if you ever want to use something like that, you can. Okay, so for the flare, there's going to be player 1 score right there. We're going to make it middle. We're going to auto size it. And we'll leave it like that for now because we're going to need another one. This is going to be player score label. And this is going to be player score 1 value label. And to match the other one, we're just going to see player 1 score, not player score 1. because we've been naming everything number first and then score. Okay. And we'll say here that that's 0. And we'll also, we'll change the minimum to be maybe like 20. Actually, it's actually, font size right now, it's 44. So maybe 50, what do you say, 50, 60, I don't know, we'll see. And that is it. We can add some padding at the bottom to make them, oh, not left. There we go. Do that. And again. Should have just made one and then waited to make the next one, but I just wanted to check to make sure all the, you know, stuffs were correct. So this name is gonna be 2. And then this is gonna say 2. And then this is gonna say 2. Alright. So now we have a UI. Let's make sure that this is removed. And this is removed as well. And these two, we can actually remove that as well, the image, so that we can only see the score stuff. Now, let's put it back how it was. And what we want to do now is make sure that whenever we actually score, these things change, right? And to do that, we need, let's call it score panel. And we're going to be creating another script here. Call it score panel UI, so that we know that this is going to be a UI script. So we need to just put it there. Now, what do we need from here? We could just put both of these things to see maybe like if the player, we could put like a name to it and it'll change the actual title up here. But for now, I think we just want to make sure that we get the value for the score. So what we need here, did I open it? Score UI. We want to open this. We want to import a library called TMP Pro because we're using Text Mesh Pro. We're gonna do serialize field, and we are going to private text mesh pro GUI, and then we're gonna call it player 1 score value label. I know, long name. And we're gonna add this one here for player 2 as well. And I guess on start, we're gonna say that the text of this is gonna be 0, right? Because there is no score just yet. And so what we have to make sure that we don't do is we have to make sure that we're not checking each frame for any changes the in the score, because that would be very bad. Usually when you deal with user interfaces and things like that, you want to do everything event-based. So they only happen once, not every frame, okay? The way that we can do it is we can have something here. See, we do this, serialize field, private. Let's make sure that we say that's private as well, just for our knowledge. And then we have something called Unity action. Poop, and we want to add the using events. So what Unity action is, it lets us pass in a... So Unity action is just a pointer pretty much to another function that gets called only whenever we tell it to. It's part of the events, and it's very useful for when you're trying to do event-driven programming, right? So the way we're going to do it is we're going to say on update UI underscore callback. That's what the name is going to be. And we're going to make sure that here it is null first. And then whenever this happens, can I do... Yeah, I can do that. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to pass in to the other script. We want to make sure that we pass in the player ID and the score value that we have, right? So whenever this happens, we can say, okay, if on update callback, if that is not null, then we want to make sure that we call this, right? And we want to pass in the player ID and oh yeah, it was this. And we want to make sure that we pass in the score. So maybe this function can actually return the actual score that we currently have so that we don't have to fetch it, right? So maybe it could be like return score, and we just do int right there, and that's it. So where was he? We're here. We'll say int score equals that, and we pass in score. And we do the same over here. This time we do player 1, and we make sure that we catch that score coming out of this function, and that way it does what it needs to do. Now we need to actually do the function, right? So we'll call it update score UI, and it's gonna take in a player ID, player, int score value, I guess. So whenever that gets called, we have to say, okay, what player was it? Switch player. And then we'll say, okay, if it was player 1, then we need to do player 1 text equals, we're going to say string dot format, because we want to. Well, we don't really want to format it. We just want to say we're just passing in the value, the score value. So it's going to be score value dot toString, and that's it. Okay. And if it's player 2, we just say 2 here and 2 here, right? And that's it. Boom. Okay. So now how do we connect this guy to the other thing, right? That should be very trivial. So what we need to do is we got the goals here, right? So we got this thing here. First, what we need to do is we want to say, okay, score 1 value is there and score 2 value is there. After that, we want to go into here and we gotta fix something. Oop, not that. So it's not showing up in our goal. Do we have this as serialized? Player input. It's not serialized. Maybe that's why. System serializable. Maybe. Does that help? No, it doesn't. How do we want to do this? Donate that. So let's get rid of that. Is there another thing called Unity event? It is. And how did this get called? Dot invoke, I believe, is it? So there are multiple ways that you can actually do events here. One of them is using invoke, right? So we're using now Unity event to see if that allows us to actually see it on the inspector. Because I don't remember which one was. Grr. Okay. So if that's not working, then I guess at start, it's gonna be if we set it to public, it's still gonna be the same. Okay, so let's try it out. Let's see, Unity. Events show on inspector to expose public class my float event okay. I have found the way. First, you have to define your own event type, which is just a basic public class. However, the custom event type must inherit from Unity event like so. Then you can make variables from it like so. Then you can set in the, okay, so, okay. Let's then now create a new C# script, custom events, we'll call it. I'll reload that. And event TS, not ST, so we change that there. We're gonna rename this guy now. Reload, open. Okay, so apparently we do Unity event and we want to pass in player ID and integer, right? Da, da, da. And we gotta make sure that dot events. What else? Was there anything else there? No. Okay. We don't need to do anything with it. We just need to say, okay, this is a system.serializable thing. We'll just call it custom events, I guess. We might want to change that at some point. Let's go to goal and let's do that custom event, and let's make that a serializable and private again. And let's hope that that worked. And it did. Awesome. So now we can see that the goal script contains an unupdate UI callback, and it gets the player ID and int32. So what we want to do here is we are going to pass this guy there, the score panel, because that's where the script is. We're going to go into the score UI, and then we're going to choose our event. What was it? Oh, there it is. Update score UI. Boom. There we go. We'll do the same thing for the left side, and we'll pass in the score panel into the object. We'll choose the score panel UI script, and if my mouse wants to move, we'll choose the update score UI. Now that should hook up everything we need to have event-based driven updates to our score. Let's check it out. So if we just let it score, we can see, oh, player 1 scored. And player 1 scored again as well. There you go. So now we have a simple UI that we can change the score, and we can actually play, and the only thing that we don't have is end game state thing. Okay, so we cannot do a game over. We cannot say who won or anything like that. We are going to be doing that next week, so don't forget to watch my videos and stay updated to get the latest information. If you liked if you like my videos, please subscribe if you haven't already. Click on that bell icon to get notifications every time I upload something new. Also, if you like this video, and if you liked other videos, and if you're learning something, please hit that like button. It does help me and my videos rank higher on the YouTube algorithm, so other people can see it, okay? And if you're wondering how you can help me out to make more videos, better videos, maybe more series or something like that, go into my Patreon page. There you can sign up for a monthly fee to help me produce more content. I do have a lot of ideas of what to do next after this, but if you also have an idea for me, if you want to see something that I haven't covered, please comment down below. Go to my social media pages, contact me there if you want. And yeah, have an awesome day. And yeah, thank you for watching.